The rain hadn't let up all day. The kind that drummed steady against the sidewalks of the South End and pooled at the corners of Harrison Avenue. I hurried from the garage under an umbrella, my laptop bag heavy against my shoulder. Already planning a late night of sketch revisions. By the time I reached the lobby of my building near Ink Block, my shoes were damp. But the sight of polished marble floors and the familiar nod from the concierge usually brought comfort. Not tonight. Something felt off the moment the elevator doors opened to my floor. A faint smell of cardboard and adhesive tape reached me before I even unlocked the door. When I pushed it open, the scene was unrecognizable. Towers of cartons blocked the living room windows. My scarves, folded wrong, poked out of half-sealed boxers. Stacks of shoes. My sketchbooks, even framed photographs had been stripped from the shelves and packed away. Sitting on the sectional, legs crossed and phone in hand, was my sister Lavinia Levy to everyone else, though the nickname had long lost its warmth for me. She didn't look up right away. Instead, she tapped her screen, let out a little laugh, and then finally said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, "We need to clear space. My husband and kids are moving in next weekend." Jonah was there too, standing awkwardly by the coffee table. His face was pale, his hands tied around the back of a chair. He didn't speak. On speakerphone, our parents chimed in faintly, their voices tinny with distance. My mother's words, "It's practical, darling. Families should stay together," felt like another box being taped shut. I dropped my keys on the counter with a metallic clatter, the sound sharper than I intended. "You're moving in." My voice barely carried, but Lavi smiled as if she had already won something, while she went on about bedrooms and how children needed space. My eyes drifted to the hallway closet. Wedged between the vacuum and a stack of fabric bolts was a slim red binder. The lease, my initials on every page. My name, alone. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I stepped further inside, letting the door click shut behind me. The boxers standing like silent witnesses to what had just begun. It hadn't started with boxers. It began weeks earlier, on a gray afternoon when Lavi showed up at my door with 2 rolling suitcases and a practiced sigh. "Just a few days," she said, brushing past me before I had even set down my coffee. Jonah looked startled but gave her a weak nod. I told myself it was temporary, that she would vanish as quickly as she had appeared. By the second week, the guest room was no longer mine to offer. She had filled the dresser with discount store clothes and draped the bed in a throat that clashed with the neutral palette I had chosen. Soon, the guest bathroom was painted lavender, a color so sharp it bled into the hall whenever the door opened. When I asked about it, she tossed her hair and replied, "You're welcome." Packages began arriving almost daily. Groceries ordered through my Prime account. Rugs with bold patterns that fought against the polished wood floors. Wall art with faux inspirational quotes. The apartment I had curated carefully, every detail tied 2 years of work, felt hijacked by someone with no stake in paying for it. Jonah grew quieter as his health dipped. He winced at the clutter but said nothing, explaining softly at night that he didn't want to start a fight. Our parents called from Cambridge and assured me this was only what families did. "Sisters helping each other," my mother said, as if the phrase were a bomb. I held my tongue. On a Sunday morning, when Levi was still asleep and Jonah was resting, I slipped into my office and made photocopies of the lease and the building regulations. I slid the duplicates into a slim folder and tucked it into my work bag. If lines were being crossed, I wanted proof of where they had been drawn. By the time Levi began hinting about bigger changes, I already knew what I would need to show. The morning I walked into my office and found the drafting table shoved against the wall, I knew the invasion had moved from inconvenience to theft. Lavi stood in the center of the room, waving her hands like a realtor conducting a tour. "This would make a perfect study and playroom," she announced. "The kids will need a space, and Dad's been talking about a quiet corner for his reading." My sketches, half-finished swatches, pinned carefully to corkboards, had been stacked in a corner like junk mail. Jonah stepped forward, voice low but firmer than I'd heard in weeks. "Don't touch her samples, Lavi. That's her work." She turned, all saccharine smile, and placed a hand on his shoulder as if soothing a child. "Relax, little brother. She can move them somewhere else. Creativity needs change." He faltered, and whatever resistance he had managed to gather slipped away. Later that evening, our parents called. My mother's tone carried the same rehearsed patience she used when I was a teenager refusing to lend. Levi address. "Be generous, Tamsin. Your sister is building stability. You have so much space. Sharing is what family does." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, staring across the apartment that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. My parents' words carried weight. But not authority. Not here. After the call ended, I sat at my desk, returning each displaced sketch to its place. I opened the red binder again, tracing the clauses with my fingertip. Sole leaseholder, came鈥攕 tenancy at will terminable with 30 days notice by tenant. Non transfer clause. No subletting, no assignment without landlord consent. Those weren't just lines on a page. They were boundaries no one else seemed willing to recognize. If my family refused to respect limits, spoken aloud, I would have to enforce the ones written in black and white. The next morning, when Levi casually mentioned that the master bedroom would obviously be better suited for our parents than for me, I didn't argue. I only looked at her, then at Jonah, and carried the binder into the kitchen, where the morning light caught its red spine like a warning. I came home early that Thursday, rain streaking the glass panes, only to find more boxes crowding the living room. My closet was half empty, scarves folded badly, shoes paired into crates. Levi lounged on the sectional, sipping Chardonnay with the satisfaction of someone already settled. When she finally looked at me, she tilted her head, her tone casual but sharpened at the edges. Don't be so dramatic, Tamsin. This isn't really your home, it's a rental. Jonah shifted uneasily near the window. His hands trembled and his gaze fell to the floor. Asterisk. The silence from him was almost worse than her words. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Instead, I crossed to the hall closet, pulled out the slim red binder, and carried it into the room, setting it on the coffee table. I flipped it open so the black ink of my name faced up. My initials marked every page. If you want it, I said evenly. Take it. Just keep paying rent $5,300 every month. The color drained from Jonah's face, and for the first time, Levi's smirk wavered. Our parents' voices, faint through the phone speaker, went quiet. I closed the binder with a soft snap, slid it back under my arm, and reached for my keys. No shouting. No fight. Only the decision that mattered. I walked to the door, feeling the weight of their stunned silence behind me. By dusk, I was standing on the porch of my parents' house in Cambridge. The city lights glowed beyond the Charles, the rain easing into mist. Eleanor opened the door before I even knocked. She looked at me, saw the exhaustion in my eyes, and said nothing more than, "Your old room is ready." She placed a mug of tea in my hands, steam rising, warmth cutting through the chill. I sipped slowly, the binder resting at my side, the taste of control settling with the heat. I wasn't finished. Not yet. Tomorrow. The real plan would begin. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, the red binder still on the nightstand beside the teacup my mother had left. The storm had cleared overnight, and the pale light over the Charles felt sharper, as if the city itself had been scrubbed clean. I dressed quickly, slid the lease into my bag, and drove back across the river to the South End. The building manager, was already in his office, sorting envelopes. He looked up, surprised to see me so early. I set the binder on his desk, opened to the termination clause, and handed him a typed letter. "This is my 30-day notice," I said. "No transfer, no the unit is to be vacated completely." He adjusted his glasses and read through the pages carefully. "You're certain?" "Yes," I said, steady. "And I'd like confirmation in writing." He nodded, signed the bottom of my copy, and stamped the date. The sound of the stamp hitting paper felt like a lock turning. By midday, my phone buzzed with alerts. Lavi had posted photographs from the balcony, the skyline behind her, wineglass in hand, our parents grinning on either side. The caption read, "Our new chapter in Boston." She tagged it with a string of hearts. Within the hour, a friend who still lived in the building forwarded screenshots. "Thought you should see what's being said." The message read, "Comments from neighbors followed. So they took over already. Isn't the lease under Tamsin's name?" Gossip traveled faster than the elevator. That evening, Jonah texted, asking to meet. I agreed, but only on neutral ground. We chose a cafe near Back Bay Station, the kind of place where trains rumbled beneath the floorboards. He arrived late, thinner than before, his eyes shadowed. I froze. He admitted, his hands wrapped tight around the paper cup. I should have stopped her, but she's so loud, and Mom listens to her. I didn't know what to do. I watched him, the same man who once filled our apartment with the scent of croissants and sugar, now looking like a stranger who had misplaced his voice. "You had choices," I said quietly. "You just didn't take them." He flinched, then nodded. "What happens now?" I leaned back, letting the clatter of dishes fill the silence between us. "The clock is ticking," I said. "They think they've moved in, but all they've done is start a countdown." I left him there, staring into the steam of his coffee. and stepped into the night air already thinking of what would come next. The following weekend, word reached me through a neighbor that Levy had staged a brunch in the apartment. By the time the video clip landed in my inbox, I already knew what I would see: a loud gathering, wine flowing before noon, and her voice carrying above the clatter of dishes. She gestured down the hallway with a flourish, saying, "We'll renovate this stretch. Open it up, perfect spot for the kids' gallery wall." Later, she announced, "That little office, we're turning it into a yoga room. It's all about vibes." Our parents were there, smiling tightly as if their approval could will her plans into reality. A week later, I learned they had cashed in part of their Cambridge home equity line to help with transition costs. The money vanished into furniture deliveries and contractors who never arrived. Mr. Rallis kept his distance but sent me polite updates. Levy had tried to approach him with Owen at her side, insisting that since they were the real residents, the lease should be amended. He explained, again, that the lease was non-transferable, that I alone held rights to the unit. "They don't want to hear it," he told me, "but the record is clear." Each note from him, signed and dated, went straight into my growing file. Meanwhile, Jonah called, his tone softer than it had been in months. He admitted he was looking for a place of his own, not in the South End but closer to Harvard Square. He would use the small inheritance his grandmother had left him. Enough for a deposit and a few months' rent. "I need to prove I can live without being carried," he said. For once, I heard determination instead of excuses. I kept my responses measured, neither forgiving nor condemning. "If you're serious, start with your own lease," I told him. The days passed, and I watched from a distance as Lavi's certainty grew louder. She posed for more balcony photos. Our parents tagged in every post. To the outside world, it looked like victory. To me, it looked like a family digging steadily deeper, blind to the ground giving way beneath their feet. The 30-day clock moved forward, and with each tick, I knew the fall was coming. On the final morning of the lease period, I woke to an email from Mr. Orles confirming that maintenance would post access notices on the unit door. By noon, the messages were up. The apartment would be vacated by the end of the week. I set my phone aside, poured a second cup of coffee, and waited. The call came faster than I expected. Lavi's voice burst through the line, shrill and cracking. "The manager says we're being evicted. What the hell is going on?" I let her words settle before answering. "The lease is in my name, Levy, only mine. The rent is $5,300 a month, and subletting is prohibited. You knew that when you moved yourself in. You can't do this," she shouted. "We've invested everything. Mom and Dad sold their house. Owen quit his job." I cut her off. "You didn't ask. You assumed, and assumptions don't hold leases." Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a link. A neighbor had recorded the chaos unfolding in the hallway. The footage showed Levy pacing in front of Mr. Orles, her voice high and furious, accusing him of betrayal. Our mother sat on the steps clutching a potted fern like it was a lifeline, while Frank strode back and forth, his face dark with anger. The camera caught him stopping suddenly, turning on his eldest daughter. His words were clear, even without the audio. "You told us this place was yours." Behind them, Jonah leaned against the wall, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, saying nothing. His silence looked heavier than any argument. I watched the video twice, then closed it. The noise, the anger, the humiliation, none of it touched me anymore. What mattered was that the lie had collapsed in front of the very people she had convinced. The 30 days were up, and the walls she had claimed as her own no longer held her. The fallout had only begun, and I knew the next call would not be about defiance, but about consequence. Within a week of the eviction, Levy and her family had vanished from the South End tower they had tried to claim. Word filtered back through relatives that they were staying with cousins in Quincy, 4 bodies crammed into a spare room meant for storage. That didn't last long. Soon, they moved into a budget motel near South Station, a place where the walls were thin and the air smelled of bleach and desperation. The gossip traveled even faster than they did. A colleague forwarded me a photo snapped by a commuter Levy behind the counter of a 24-hour diner, hair tied back, apron stained. Another message showed my father sweeping a tiled floor in the background while my mother wiped down tables. The same people who once lectured me about generosity now wore exhaustion on their faces, paying a price they never thought could reach them. One evening, Eleanor called. Her voice trembled in a way I hadn't heard before. "We should have listened, Tamsin. We believed her because we wanted to believe. I'm sorry for the pressure we put on you." Frank came on the line after, gruff and brief. "We were wrong." It was the closest I had ever heard him come to admitting fault. Jonah reached out to. We met on a quiet Sunday in Cambridge, this time without excuses. He told me he had signed a lease for a small studio near Harvard Square using his grandmother's inheritance. I need to learn to stand on my own, he said. No more hiding behind you or behind them. He admitted his weakness plainly. Then mentioned he had begun therapy to face what silence had cost him. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied his face, the lines deeper, but steadier than before. Maybe accountability had finally broken through where apologies never could. As I walked home that night, the city lights reflected across the river, steady and indifferent. My silence, my patience, my refusal to wrestle in their chaos had done more than any outburst could. Justice had unfolded in its own time. And I hadn't needed to force a single piece of it. What remained was to decide what to build once the rubble had cleared and how much of the past I was willing to carry forward. Months passed, and the noise of that disastrous season faded into something quieter, almost like background static. My business had a profitable quarter, enough for a substantial bonus. Instead of pouring it into expansion, I signed the deed on a one-bedroom condo tucked along the brick-lined streets of Beacon Hill. Smaller, yes, but filled with light that spilled across old pine floors and climbed-up walls that felt like they had been waiting for me. I moved slowly, choosing each piece of furniture with intention. No rushed deliveries, no compromises to please anyone else. The first thing I hung was not a mirror or a painting from another hand, but a textile I had woven myself, linen and indigo threads stretched into a pattern I designed long before the chaos. It anchored the space as mine, in a way no contract ever could. Jonah and I began attending separate therapy sessions, then eventually overlapping ones. We didn't call it reconciliation, we called it reconstruction. Brick by emotional brick. We tested whether trust could be rebuilt without erasing what had been broken. Progress came in small gestures. He signed his own lease, paid his own bills, and showed up on time. For the first time, I saw him take up responsibility not as a burden, but as a choice. One afternoon in early spring, I stepped out of a fabric shop near South Station and saw her. Lavi stood outside a payday lender, clutching paperwork, her expression brittle. Our eyes met briefly. Neither of us spoke. She turned away first, heels scuffed, bag fraying at the seams. I felt no rush of triumph, no anger, only the certainty that the chapter had already closed. That evening, Jonah came over for dinner. He brought loose leaf tea and set it carefully on the counter. In my new kitchen, he did not touch a drawer or a cupboard until I gestured. He poured water into mugs and sat across from me, patient, present, and unassuming. As I watched the steam rise between us, I understood something clearly. Power was not about holding on or forcing outcomes. It was about walking away at the right time and letting the trap seal around those who had built it for themselves.